All right, let's talk Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team, of course, heading into a massive matchup, division matchup this weekend. This is a team with all of its goals still in front of it, but we got interesting news when it comes to Pittsburgh and the most important position on the field. We're talking the quarterback position. We'll get into that in just 1 second. Really cool stuff coming out of Pittsburgh. But first, I'm Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, we all know when the Pittsburgh Steelers brought in Aaron Rodgers, it was a short-term answer. We all understood that. It was obvious, of course. The guy's north of 40, right? His MVP years aren't too far behind, but the reality is, he is a little older. Achilles injury a few years ago. Bringing in Aaron Rodgers was to stabilize the quarterback position, go for a run in 2025, and then obviously look towards the future. And that was really apparent when they drafted Will Howard, of course, and day 3 of the last NFL draft. Will Howard is basically the kind of archetypal late round guy you want to develop. He falls under that Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady being the extreme example, kind of winner in college with good physical tools, good head on his shoulders. And it's clear the Pittsburgh Steelers really like the kid. He obviously had the injury, but the good news is for Pittsburgh, he's been back into the fold. He's been added back into the fold. And we got some good news there. Let's go ahead and pull up the first post here highlighting this, courtesy of Mark Caboli on X. He wrote, this was a few days ago now, "It is Will Howard time. He has been activated." And this next post, courtesy of Matthew Luciao, if you don't mind pulling that up as well, with comments from Will Howard, he said, "It's a blessing, and I'm really thankful they made the decision to activate me because we have Aaron, so it's not necessarily like I'm coming up to play, but it's more for my growth and development. That means a lot that they're willing to do that for me, and I just don't want to make them regret it." That's really important because they did not have to activate Will Howard at all. They didn't. He's not going to play, barring some catastrophe, of course. He's not the backup. He's not the second string guy. And if you activate a player, he now is on your 53, which means he's going to have to play in practice. He's going to be in meetings and all that kind of stuff. Guys on IR, guys who are not activated, basically get shuttled off to the side. They're not involved with the team. They obviously wouldn't put Will Howard on the practice squad. Then someone else could get him, pick him up from the squad. So again, activating him was a very clear and obvious move that the Steelers believe there is a good chance Will Howard is their future at the quarterback position, and they want him to go through the process. They want him to work side by side with Aaron Rodgers and this offensive staff and all the offensive players to get brought up to speed. They want him to run the scout team. They want him to do all the things teams want young quarterbacks to do when they try and develop them. And look, we've seen this happen with Pittsburgh before. Of course, Kenny Pickett was a recent example where it didn't work out. But the reality is the Steelers have been very high, and there's been a lot of great reporting on Will Howard in terms of having the right head on his shoulders and everything about Howard coming out of Ohio State, his story, his transfer story, what he did for the Buckeyes and what he did in the offseason for Pittsburgh through training camp has been nothing but positive in terms of he's a guy that can develop into something special. And one of the things we learned this season, we look across the National Football League, that having the right head on your shoulders and the right scheme is more important than raw physical talent. The Indianapolis Colts had the most physically talented quarterback, or one of them, in Anthony Richardson. They replaced him with Daniel Jones, who is a veteran guy whose physical tools and career hasn't been going well. Good scheme, good system, his veteran mindset. They're playing good football in Indianapolis, right? That's just how it works. Having a smart quarterback with a good head on his shoulders that can read a defense and manage personalities has become more important than freakish athletic gifts, and that's what Will Howard is to a T. But the question here for Pittsburgh, obviously, as they look towards the future, depending on what happens this season, of course, got all their football in front of them, is what they do at that position. And when you look ahead to the 2026 quarterback draft class, it's very, if we're going to be totally honest, underwhelming. Let's go ahead and pull up a graphic here to highlight some of the top names, courtesy of PFSN via Ian Cummings. And you can see on the graphic in front of you, their top 5 quarterbacks are Fernando Mendoza, a guy who has sort of come out of nowhere. You got Dante Moore, a guy who's come out of nowhere. Ty Simpson, a guy who's come out of nowhere. You're noticing a theme here. Lenore Sellers, who's a freaky good athlete, and Darian Minsaw, who's kind of a, hey, we need a 5th guy. Nothing against Darian, that's just the reality. Lenore Sellers is basically Anthony Richardson light. Not a good sign. I don't think people want to get Lenore Sellers. And the other 3 quarterbacks basically have one season of body of work to go on, which usually isn't a good indicator. Ask the Jets, selecting Mark Sanchez, how that worked out for them with really one good season to work on. The reality is the successful quarterbacks in the National Football League, generally speaking, are guys that played a lot of good football, that have played a lot of football. The one-year wonders don't tend to work out, right? And you guys remember Kenny Pickett, he had one great year for Pitt. He obviously played a lot of football, didn't really become, obviously, what Pittsburgh fans wanted him to become. So these one-year wonders, I guarantee you people in Pittsburgh are nervous, right? And obviously where the Steelers are in terms of their win-loss record this season and where they're probably going to be, playoff team, the way things are trending, depending how they finish, it's not like they're going to have a chance for the 1 or 2 guys. So Do you want the freaky athlete Lenore Sellers, or do you want Darian Minsoff to get a guy like that and pick number 22 or whatever? No, right? I don't think that puts you in a better position. It just kind of puts you back at the drawing board. Will Howard, however, gives you a different approach. He gives you a guy with a good head on his shoulders, a grown up, a mature person who understands personalities. And let me give you a great example of this. So this was also from Matthew Luciao. Luciao, excuse me. I just want to read something that Howard said recently, talking about all the tips he gets from Aaron Rodgers. He said, "I literally have a Word document of the nuggets I get from Aaron every day." So I want to talk about why this is important and why this is real good maturity here from Will Howard, and a good example of why I think he'd be a good quarterback when it comes to managing personalities. Aaron Rodgers is a big personality for sure. He likes being told how smart he is, right? That just is who Aaron Rodgers is as a person, right? That's just not. He's a great person in terms of quarterback play. Seems to be a nice guy. His teammates love him. So I'm not saying anything bad about Rodgers, but the reality is he likes being told how smart he is. What is Will Howard doing here in terms of managing Aaron's personality? Tell him how smart he is, man. I got a Word document of all the things Roger says to me, which of course, one, is smart, but two, just sort of underlines, I should say, Will Howard's understanding of managing personalities. He did that at Ohio State. They had nothing but first round picks everywhere. A lot of talented guys that were going on to make millions in the NFL draft, and he managed everyone's personality through some ups and downs. They lost multiple games his final season at Ohio State till they won the whole darn thing. They won a championship. He knows how to be the leader, the grown up in the room, the stabilizing influence, manage personalities, read the defense, make the right throws. Those are the core elements of great quarterback play. We fall in love with the physical tools, the arm talent, the legs, the crazy highlight plays. And that's true, right? That's fun stuff to watch. But the successful quarterbacks long term are the ones that can manage the personalities. Roethlisberger was a great scrambler and had a good arm and was a beast in the pocket. But what he did managing Antonio Brown, what he did leading the offense, what he did executing the offense was more important than any of those elements, right? It's the leadership. It's the managing the people. It's the Joes, not necessarily the X's and O's. And I think Will Howard has a chance to have a massive impact for the Steelers, I think becoming their long-term answer. I don't think he's going to play this season. I don't think no one expects him to. And I don't think anyone is calling for him to replace Aaron Rodgers, obviously, anytime soon. But this is the huge step for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not a little thing either, because this is taking up a roster spot for a third quarterback, which a lot of teams aren't doing these days, especially for a team that has playoff aspirations like Pittsburgh. This is a big ringing vote of endorsement here from the Steelers front office and coaching staff that they truly believe Will Howard has a chance to be a long-term answer for them. All right, Miles, that's a lot from me. I want to hear from you when it comes to the Steelers quarterback. But first, Pittsburgh fans, you guys get the first word here before we go over to my co-host. What are your thoughts on Will Howard? Do you think he's actually a viable option for the future? Or do you want to go quarterback in the upcoming draft? Or, if so, who, right? What do you think of the Steelers quarterback situation? We're talking medium and long term here, assuming Aaron Rodgers is done after the season, which I think he will be. But put that aside, what do you want the Steelers to do long term? Is it Howard? Is it somewhere else? Give us your answer in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you now. Give us your thoughts on everything Will Howard and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, Nick, one more bit of information before people give us their opinions in the comments below. Just something to think about as far as who you pick if it's someone in the draft. There have been the recent rumors, and this is even more foreboding for what you were bringing up here about the Steelers, about Lenore Sellers from South Carolina, that also is looking like he might even transfer and go one more year to the Miami Hurricanes or somewhere of that nature. So that's something, he not even necessarily 100% lock to go into the draft this season. So like you said, I think it's really interesting because this year's draft class looks not so great. It's a very, lackluster. There's some talented guys, but like you said, 1 year of work for, a quarterback, it does not make, a prospect. I think you need to see a little bit more work. I think need to see, just a little bit more of a full body of work for these guys. One season, you come in, no one has tape on you, the offense starts to get hot, and it does some interesting stuff. That's one thing. But how many times have we seen second season? You see the end of last year, a perfect example, South Carolina with Lenore Sellers. The end of last year, they're coming on strong. They're really hot. They're beating Alabama. They're beating people down the stretch, all kinds of stuff, crazy stuff going on with him. But then all of a sudden, the second year comes in, you get a little bit more tape on this offense. People start to break it down and see what happens. Haven't necessarily had the best season. The offense hasn't ran too smoothly as well. So I think that's, something interesting to think about. There is the offense coordinator situation, but still, I don't think those are good options. I do think Will Howard's a good option. I think we've talked about this this offseason a lot is just Will Howard. He's got all the right intangibles. He's got, you said a far comparison for Brady, but I do think he has some Tom Brady-esque intangibles. There's off-field stuff, the mentality, just everything we've heard about him coming through the season, how he's worked back from injury, just the positive mindset that he's had. He seems like a really interesting prospect at the future quarterback for the Steelers for me, just because of everything all culminating together, everything he's done. Like you said, his managing of the personalities. I think that's something I didn't really think of. There's tons of personalities on an Ohio State team who we all remember lost that last game of the season with Will Howard to the Michigan Wolverines. How hard is it to, right the ship and keep that thing going when you're going to the playoffs after a detrimental loss there? And, at the time, if you remember that point of the season, everyone's saying, hey, should we fire Ryan Day? Does this team need to get blown up? He can't make the big one. Obviously, they go on and do just that. But for him to keep his head on straight, keep his teammates' heads on straight, I think that talks to exactly what you're saying. This is a guy who I think can handle a team, a locker room of people like the Pittsburgh Steelers have. He can come in and be the lead guy. I think he has the tools, physical tools to be a great quarterback as well. We've seen him use his legs multiple times in college. He's a great runner, and he has a strong arm. So I really like Will Howard. I think he at least deserves a chance in this activation of him. For him to start getting in with the team, I think it speaks a lot that, like you said, they don't want to put him on the practice squad because that's probably the end of Will Howard with the Steelers. Someone's going to scoop that guy up. But I think him being able to come into team activities, all this stuff, and how excited he seems, not to even play, really, just to be involved with the team. I think it's a great sign for the Steelers going forward. This seems like a really smart move, and I love what we've seen so far from Will Howard.
Yeah, and just one final point to end on here. It's not just our opinion about Will Howard being a good fit and a good quarterback potentially for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the experts, right? John Gruden, obviously, guy knows quarterback play, of course. He came out during the draft class review when he goes through and sits down with the quarterbacks and evaluates their tape and their personalities and says, listen, Will Howard has a chance to be QB1, the best quarterback in the last draft class, right? So again, he obviously wasn't a first-round guy, not even close. So if you look at where Will Howard is and where he was, it's sort of lining up, right, in terms of the expectations of what some of the experts were saying up to the draft, how he played during the preseason, training camp, that time frame, OTAs, all of that, and now all the way up to now, the Steelers activating him, getting him reps, right? That's not a little thing. I know I hit on that a second ago, but in the NFL, you only have so many roster spots, guys. You only get that 53. It's not college where you have 110-man rosters and everyone's 3 deep, 4 deep everywhere, right? If you have Will Howard activated, it means you've got, a key backup corner is still on the practice squad, or your special teams is down a guy, right? That is short-term pain for long-term gain, right? The Steelers taking that move at the quarterback position here with Will Howard, I think is a sign they truly believe he's got a chance to be their starter. Otherwise, why do it? You have nothing to gain by doing it. Why would you hurt your team for short-term pain unless you thought there was some long-term gain by activating Will Howard? I think this is a clear sign they believe he has a chance to be their starter, and I'm excited to see how he does in terms of practice and taking advantage of this opportunities and what the Steelers do going forward at this position as they look for, finally, their long-term answer to the great Ben Roethlisberger.